We have with us, producing the show, of course, this evening, as he does every Sunday. He is the host of Ringside Report Radio, Wednesdays and Fridays at 11 o'clock, right here on TSN 690. And you can check him out at ringsidereport.net. And you can follow him on Twitter at Dave Simon MMA. It is Dave Simon.
Yeah. A lot of plugs there, man.
Yeah, I know.
Stuff.
I like to build up the guests, make them feel comfortable, you know?
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable, I guess.
Yeah. There you go. So, Dave.
Yes.
I saw a commercial in the background for an upcoming MMA pay-per-view, and not pay-per-view, rather, but an upcoming MMA card.
Yes.
And Dave Simon went, can't wait for that one.
Oh, my God.
Now, what is happening? It's coming up next Saturday.
Yeah. 6 days away. UFC Lightweight Championship on the line. Benson Henderson, the number one lightweight on the planet. Fresh off beating Frankie Edgar twice. He beat Edgar the first time via decision to take the title. They then had an immediate rematch. He beat him again, got the unanimous decision, and now he fights Nate Diaz on Saturday night on Fox. It's UFC on Fox 5, the main event for the UFC lightweight title. Really doesn't get much better than that. But it's a triple main event, and just fantastic fights, and any one of those fights could main event a UFC pay-per-view, but we're getting 3 of those fights on one card for free on Fox. Alexander Gustafsson, an up-and-coming light heavyweight, taking on a former champion, Mauricio Shogun Rua. Just a fantastic fight there. And then another brilliant fight at 170 pounds. A former champion, BJ the Prodigy Penn, returns to fight an up-and-coming welterweight who trains here and lives here in Montreal. He's from out in BC, Rory McDonald. That is going to be a phenomenal fight. I cannot wait for those 3 fights. It's a sick card that the UFC is putting on Fox on Saturday night.
Now, Dave, you mentioned it's a free show, obviously, on Fox. Is this the best of the free shows you've seen so far? I know we had one where it was basically one match as well. So
right.
Where does it rank for you? Is there a lot of hype around this one?
I would say this is probably the number one. We haven't seen a title match on Fox since that first Fox show in November of 2011 when Dos Santos beat Cain Velasquez. I think that this is the best top-to-bottom Fox card that they've put together. We've had some pretty good Fox cards. The Chael Sonnen Michael Bisping fight when they had Rashad Evans and Phil Davis on the same card. That was pretty good, but I think this is much better. A title fight here, the lightweight title in a fight that, and I really don't know where I'm going to be going here. I don't know who I'm going to pick. Benson Henderson has just great wrestling. He's a fantastic grappler, great submissions, great submission defense. But Nate Diaz just has brilliant jiu-jitsu. He's a Cesar Gracie black belt. Henderson, a very good striker. I think maybe Diaz would get the edge in striking. Just a great boxer is Nate Diaz, and he's looked absolutely sick in his past couple of fights. But Benson Henderson is just a great fighter, very athletic, very tough, very flexible. He's got a lot of skills that he brings into it. So does Nate Diaz. I mean, this fight is phenomenal. You really couldn't get any better for the UFC lightweight title than Nate Diaz versus Benson Henderson. It's going to be a great fight, and I really don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be going as far as my pick on Friday night when we preview it.
So you'll go right up to game time for the show, and
yeah, I like to see the weigh-ins before I make my official selection. You know, I'm trying to help people win money. I'm trying to give them the latest odds. You know, I want to give them the last number that I can, and the exact weight of the fighters and stuff like that. So I like to do it on Saturday night and make the official prediction rather on Friday night, the night of the weigh-ins, before the UFC show on Saturday.
Dave Simon joining us here on the program, talking some MMA. And Dave, you mentioned Diaz. You and I had a chat on the air about his brother, a guy that people maybe have forgotten about a little bit here. He's under, of course, a suspension imposed by a commission. Why don't you tell the folks about what happened and what's going to be happening, hopefully, for fans in the upcoming future?
Well, Nick Diaz fought Carlos Condit in February of this year. It went to a 5-round decision. Condit wound up taking the decision. It was a very, very close fight, and a lot of people, including myself, Joe Rogan, and a lot of people around the MMA world feel that Nick Diaz actually won that fight. Now, after the fight, it was revealed that he had marijuana metabolites in his system. He was suspended for a year by the Nevada State Athletic Commission because this was not
multiple offense.
Yeah, this was not his first infraction.
Yeah.
Usually you'd probably get 6 months or maybe a light fine or something like that, but he was suspended for a full year because this had happened before. So he's eligible to come back from suspension in February of 2013, which is now about 3 months away. There's been a lot of talk that Nick Diaz, when he comes back from suspension, would be fighting George St. Pierre for the UFC welterweight championship. I believe he should fight George St. Pierre when he comes back. I think it's the biggest money fight the UFC can have for GSP outside of Anderson Silva. I don't think that fight is going to happen. Faraz Zahabi, George St. Pierre's head trainer, spoke to an MMA news website earlier this week and said that Nick Diaz makes the most sense for them right now, and they're looking at Nick Diaz. Johnny Hendricks is in the background. He knocked out Martin Kampmann at UFC 154 in the co-main event of the GSP Condit fight.
Now, does Hendricks have a case to be? Does Hendricks have a case to be? Feel slighted here and jumped a little bit if that happens with Diaz?
Yes, he certainly does. I mean, Hendricks knocked out Martin Kampmann and he looked good. But here's the thing with Johnny Hendricks. He also beat John Fitch, knocked him out, looked very good. But he fought Josh Koscheck and he won a split decision, which means that 2 judges felt he won the fight and 1 judge felt that Koscheck won the fight. I actually felt Koscheck won that fight. Now, the decision was given to Johnny Hendricks. Whether Hendricks beat Koscheck or not, he can wait 1 more fight for a title shot. He hasn't done as much as Nick Diaz has done. He's not the name in the sport that Nick Diaz is, and he doesn't have the bad blood and the history with George St. Pierre that Nick Diaz had. Nick Diaz was scheduled to fight George St. Pierre in October of last year back at UFC 137. He no-showed a press conference to hype the fight, and the fight was then given to Carlos Condit. GSP wound up getting hurt, so Diaz wound up taking the fight and eventually fighting Carlos Condit in February. Now, I think that Hendricks can wait. I think that the fight that I talked about between BJ Penn and Rory McDonald that's happening on Saturday night would be a great fight to determine an opponent for Johnny Hendricks. I think the winner of BJ Penn, Rory McDonald, should fight Johnny Hendricks. I think Nick Diaz should fight George St. Pierre, and then have it settled that way. If Johnny Hendricks can beat either BJ Penn or Rory McDonald, he will leave no doubt in anyone's minds. Beating Koscheck, beating Fitch, beating Kampmann. If he can add Rory McDonald
more hype.
or BJ Penn to that list, then he deserves a title shot.
And
so one more fight.
And it's all about selling tickets. And Diaz is just a bigger ticket seller right now as well, I would assume.
Yes,
and also coming off. Now, Dave, one other aspect of the story, which was the suspension itself. When is it lifted? And when can you start to promote it? And you gave me an example off air of somebody else who was in a similar situation and how they handled it.
Yeah, Alistair Overeem had elevated levels of testosterone. He was suspended up until the end of this month, the end of December. So he was suspended for a year from December of last year. I think it was 9 months, actually. It was from, March of this year to December. Either way, he was suspended, and the UFC has already begun promoting his fight on February 2nd against Antonio Silva. They got special permission from the Nevada State Athletic Commission to start promoting Overeem's fight, even though Overeem hasn't been granted a license. So it's kind of a risky move for the UFC, but they have enough confidence in Overeem that he will get licensed, and they can promote this fight with Antonio Silva in February. The UFC has not asked for a similar exemption to start promoting anything with Nick Diaz, but the UFC trying to set up a fight for Overeem in February, and his suspension ends in December. You don't have that much time. You have a couple of months to promote that fight. When you look at Nick Diaz and a potential fight with George St. Pierre, I don't see that fight happening until at least April. So if he gets his license in February, you still have all of February, you have March, and I guess part of April to promote that fight with GSP, but I don't think the GSP fights in April. I think probably he'll most likely fight in May or even June or July of 2013. And I think that it will be Diaz and GSP sometime in the spring or early summer of 2013.